a ruthless biker gang, a town held hostage, and one 90-year-old war hero who refuses to back down. When Ellie Carter makes one phone call, she sets off a chain reaction that will change everything. Will she save Brookstone or die trying? Like and subscribe for more thrilling stories. The mysterious woman in the call that changed everything. Brookstone, Virginia, a town that once flourished with hard-working families, mom-and-pop stores, and a strong sense of community. But times had changed. The heart of Brookstone had been strangled by fear, its people trapped under the iron grip of the Iron Fangs, a ruthless motorcycle gang that had taken control, demanding protection payments from every business owner. Those who refused quickly learned the price of defiance, burned down shops, broken bones, and shattered lives. But on one particular morning, the Iron Fangs picked the wrong target. It was just after dawn when Ellie Carter, a frail-looking 90-year-old woman, pulled her battered old Ford Taurus into Mike's Gas and Go, the local gas station she had visited for over 3 decades. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, her piercing blue eyes sharp as ever. The station's young clerk, Jimmy Lawson, smiled as he wiped his hands on a rag, his friendly voice cutting through the stillness of the morning. "Morning, Mrs. Carter. The usual." Ellie nodded with a slight smile. "Full tank, Jimmy." She stepped out of her car, moving with careful but deliberate precision. Years of military discipline hadn't left her, even if her body didn't move as fast as it once had. As she grabbed the pump, the familiar scent of gasoline mixed with the crisp autumn air, and she found herself lost in thought, until the sound of approaching motorcycles shattered the peace. A deep, guttural rumble rolled over the quiet streets like an approaching storm. Jimmy's face went pale. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, stepping back toward the station. "It's them." Ellie didn't turn. She watched them through the reflection in her car's side mirror. 1, 2, 5. No, 10 bikes, each one gleaming with chrome, tattooed with the snarling wolf emblem of the Iron Fangs. The gang pulled into the lot, their massive engines roaring before dying out one by one. The leader, Razor, climbed off his Harley, his boots hitting the pavement with an arrogant thud. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, his face weathered from years of street fights and hard living. His signature black leather vest bore patches that told stories of violence, of gang wars won and enemies lost. He took off his sunglasses, revealing dark, calculating eyes. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Razor's voice carried across the lot, sharp as broken glass. His crew chuckled as they dismounted, forming a loose, menacing circle. "Grandma's out for her morning drive," one of them sneered. Ellie remained calm, finishing up her gas. They were trying to get a reaction out of her. She had seen worse. Far worse. "Just getting gas," she replied evenly. "No need for trouble." Another gang member, a lanky man with a snake tattoo coiling up his neck, let out a laugh. "Yo, Razor, check out the plate." Razor's gaze followed the man's finger to Ellie's license plate frame. Vietnam veteran. Proudly served. Razor's lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, this is rich. You hear that, boys? The old lady thinks she's a vet." The gang erupted into laughter. Razor stepped closer, his presence looming over Ellie. "What did you do in Nam, sweetheart?" His tone dripped with condescension. "Serve coffee to the real soldiers?" Ellie's grip tightened around the gas pump. A distant memory flickered in her mind. The deafening roar of helicopter blades, the metallic tang of blood and sweat, the desperate voices over the radio calling for air support. She had flown through hell and back. She turned to face him, her eyes cold and steady. "I flew combat missions, son." Her voice was quiet but firm. "Rescued men while bullets flew past my head. I fought for my country while you were probably still in diapers." The laughter stopped. For the first time, Razor hesitated, but only for a second. He quickly masked it with an arrogant grin. "Big talk, old lady, but you don't look so tough now." Then he grabbed her arm. His fingers clamped down with bruising force. "Let me tell you something about this town, lady." Razor leaned in, his breath hot against her face. "This ain't your kind of place anymore. We run Brookstone now. You're just another relic waiting to be forgotten." Ellie's heart remained steady. She had faced worse than Razor, far worse. Her mind flashed back to 1968, to the burning wreckage of a downed helicopter, to the desperate grip of a wounded soldier she had pulled from the jaws of death. That soldier's name had been Colonel James Iron Jim Morgan, and Iron Jim had once told her, "If you ever need anything, Ellie, anything at all, you just call." In all these years, she never had, but today was different. She calmly reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Razor and his crew laughed. "Call in the cops? Go ahead," he taunted. "They won't do a damn thing." Ellie looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "I'm not calling the cops." She pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice. Then a familiar voice answered, rough and steady as steel. "Ellie." She met Razor's eyes. "Jim, it's time." For the first time, Razor looked uncertain. "Who the hell is Jim?" Ellie smiled. "You'll find out soon enough." And then, from the distance, another rumble. But this wasn't the chaotic growl of the Iron Fangs bikes. This was something different, something powerful. The synchronized roar of 50 motorcycles, moving as one, and they were coming fast. Razor's smirk faded as he turned toward the sound. Ellie took a step forward, her voice quiet but lethal. "You boys wanted to see what a real veteran looks like?" She crossed her arms. "Well, get ready, because they're about to show you. Veterans legend, the wolves at the door." The sound of 50 roaring motorcycles filled the morning air like the distant thunder of an approaching storm. Razor turned toward the noise, his smirk faltering. His men shifted uneasily. They were used to being the biggest predators in town. But this was something else. A moment later, the first wave of motorcycles appeared over the horizon, gleaming chrome under the rising sun. They weren't as like the Iron Fangs. There was precision in their movement, a trained rhythm that only men who had served together in the fires of war could achieve. Leading the pack was Colonel James Iron Jim Morgan, his presence commanding even from the saddle of his massive Harley-Davidson. His silver hair blew back in the wind, his weathered face hardened with purpose. Behind him, the Veterans Legion, men and women of all ages, clad in leather jackets, military patches, and battle scars. They weren't just bikers, they were warriors. Razor swallowed hard, forcing himself to stand tall. He couldn't show weakness, not in front of his men. "Who the hell are these guys?" Snake Tattoo muttered, shifting his weight uneasily. Razor clenched his jaw. "Trouble?" The Legion pulled into the lot, their engines idling in deep, synchronized growls. They moved like a well-trained military unit, calculating, composed, dangerous. Iron Jim dismounted first, removing his helmet, locking eyes with Ellie. "You called, Ellie?" Ellie nodded. "Took you long enough." Jim smirked, but his eyes turned ice cold as they shifted to Razor and his gang. "Which one of you put your hands on this woman?" Razor forced a laugh, stepping forward. "Oh, relax, Grandpa. Just a misunderstanding." Jim took another step. He was a full head taller than Razor, his presence undeniable. "Boy, I was flying helicopters in combat zones before you even knew how to wipe your own damn ass," Jim said evenly. "So let me ask again. Who put their hands on her?" The entire Legion took a step forward in unison. The tension was suffocating. Razor shifted slightly but kept up his act. "We were just having a little fun," he sneered. "Didn't know she had to call in the cavalry." Jim didn't blink. "She didn't call the cavalry. She called family." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Ellie took a step beside Jim, her voice sharp as a blade. "You said you were the law of this town, Razor?" She gestured to the Legion behind her. "Well, I hope you're ready to enforce it." Razor's fingers twitched toward his belt, where a knife was tucked under his vest. But Jim noticed. In an instant, Jim's hand shot forward, grabbing Razor by the wrist and twisting, forcing him to drop the knife onto the pavement. "Bad move!" Jim tightened his grip. Razor grimaced but didn't make a sound. He wouldn't let his men see him flinch. Ellie leaned in slightly. "You came here looking for an easy target, but today, son, you found the wrong one." Jim released Razor's wrist with a shove, sending him stumbling back. One of Razor's men instinctively reached for his own weapon. Big mistake. In an instant, half the Veterans Legion drew their sidearms. Some carried legally registered pistols. Others simply placed their hands on the grips of their knives or brass knuckles. They weren't pointing weapons. They didn't have to. The message was clear. Whoa, whoa! Snake Tattoo raised his hands. We don't want no trouble. Razor's chest rose and fell with deep breaths. His pride was wounded, but he wasn't stupid. Jim tilted his head. Then get on your bikes and ride. Don't let me see your faces here again. For a moment, Razor debated. He could call their bluff, start a fight, but deep down he knew this wasn't a bluff. He let out a slow exhale, turning to his crew. Mount up. One by one, the Iron Fangs got back on their bikes. Engines roared to life, and as they turned to leave, Razor cast one last glare at Ellie. This ain't over. Ellie simply smiled. It never is. The gang peeled out of the gas station, roaring down the street, kicking up dust as they disappeared into the distance. Jim exhaled, finally turning back to Ellie. That was a hell of a way to start the morning. Ellie chuckled. You know me, Jim. I never liked mornings to be too quiet. Jimmy, the gas station attendant, finally exhaled, looking like he had been holding his breath for minutes. Jesus, Mrs. Carter, who the hell are you? Ellie smirked. Just an old woman who knows the right people. But the fight wasn't over. That night, Razor sat alone in his hideout, a dingy, smoke-filled bar at the edge of town. His hand throbbed from where Jim had grabbed him, but the pain in his pride burned far worse. His second-in-command, Diesel, hesitated before speaking. Boss, we should let this one go. Razor's eyes snapped up. Let it go? His voice was deadly quiet. They humiliated us, Diesel. You want me to just let that stand? Diesel sighed. That ain't just some biker gang, Razor. That's the Veterans Legion. These guys ain't punks. They're soldiers, war heroes. They've fought real battles. Razor slammed his fist on the table, making the drinks rattle. I don't give a damn who they are. They don't run this town. We do. He leaned forward, his eyes dark and vengeful. Call in some favors. We're not just going to scare them. We're going to break them. Diesel hesitated. Boss, what exactly are you thinking? Razor's lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile. You'll see. By the time I'm done, that old lady and her biker friends will be begging us for mercy. The war for Brookstone. The first strike, the Veterans Legion had won the first battle, but Razor wasn't just licking his wounds. He was planning something bigger, something that would make sure Ellie Carter and her war buddies never dared to challenge him again. Late that night, deep in the Iron Fangs hideout, an old auto shop turned gang headquarters, Razor sat at a long, battered table, surrounded by his top men. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of motor oil. The jukebox in the corner played a low, eerie country tune. Across from Razor sat Marshall, a former Black Ops mercenary, now a gun for hire. His ice-cold eyes scanned the room, evaluating the men before him. So, Marshall said, his voice like gravel, you need a problem handled? Razor took a slow drag of his cigarette. I need that old bitch gone, her and her whole damn biker army. But I don't just want them dead. I want them ruined. Marshall's lips twitched into something resembling a smirk. And what are you willing to do to make that happen? Razor exhaled a plume of smoke. Whatever it takes. Marshall leaned forward. Good answer. The nightmare begins. 2 nights later, Brookstone burned. It started with Mason's hardware store. The fire tore through the wooden building like it had been waiting for an excuse to turn to ash. Tom Mason, the aging shop owner, stood outside in his pajamas, watching helplessly as decades of work were consumed by flames. Then, Diana's diner. Windows shattered, booths overturned, walls sprayed with Iron Fang graffiti. This is our town. The police were slow to respond. Too slow. Sheriff Robert Hayes, a veteran himself, was furious, but he was fighting a battle against an invisible enemy. Someone in City Hall was feeding information to the Iron Fangs, leaking police patrol routes, keeping them one step ahead. Ellie and the Veterans Legion arrived at the diner as Diana, the owner, stood outside with tears in her eyes, clutching a baseball bat like it was the only thing keeping her standing. They're trying to scare us, Iron Jim said, scanning the wreckage. Ellie's expression hardened. Number. They're trying to break us. Then came the worst news of all. Anna, Jimmy's little sister, was missing. The kidnapping. The call came in a few hours later. Razor's voice crackled over Ellie's phone, dripping with cruel amusement. "Hope you're enjoying the fireworks, old lady." Ellie gritted her teeth. "Where is she? You want her back?" Razor chuckled. "Then here's the deal. You and your biker grandpas leave town. For good. No more playing hero. No more Legion. You walk away, the kid walks free. Stay, and we put her in the ground." Ellie's grip tightened around the phone. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Razor." "Oh, yeah," he sneered. "We'll see about that." The call ended. Jimmy punched a wall. "We can't just let them get away with this." Iron Jim exhaled through his nose, his jaw clenched. "We won't." Ellie turned to her people. "We're going to war. Preparing for battle." The Veterans Legion didn't operate like a normal biker gang. They were soldiers. They had maps, surveillance, strategy. Ellie and Jim spread out a detailed blueprint of Brookstone, marking every known Iron Fangs hideout, every suspected informant, and every possible location where Anna could be held. Sarah Chen, a former Army intelligence officer, pointed to a warehouse on the outskirts of town. "That's their best bet. Isolated, easy to control, but they'll be expecting us." Iron Jim cracked his knuckles. "Then let's give them something they won't expect." The rescue mission. Midnight. The Veterans Legion moved like ghosts, rolling through town on silent engines. Two teams. Team Alpha, led by Ellie and Iron Jim, would infiltrate the warehouse and extract Anna. Team Bravo, led by Sarah, would cut off all escape routes. Ellie pulled her .45 pistol from its holster. It had been a long time since she'd held a weapon with this much purpose. Iron Jim glanced at her. "You ready for this, Ellie?" She chambered around. "I was born ready." The crown. They struck fast and hard. The first two guards never saw it coming, subdued in seconds. Inside, Razor and his men were waiting, Anna tied to a chair in the center of the room. Her eyes were wide with terror, but when she saw Ellie walk in, she exhaled a shaking breath of relief. Razor stood behind her, a knife pressed against her throat. "Ah, there she is, the legend herself." Razor smirked. "You really thought you could just walk in here and take her back?" Ellie leveled her gun at him. "Let the girl go, Razor. You're out of options." "You think so?" Then, a gunshot, not from Ellie, from Marshall. A bullet ripped through Iron Jim's shoulder, sending him crashing to the ground. Ellie's breath hitched. They'd been set up. The Legion wasn't just outnumbered, they were outgunned. This wasn't a hostage negotiation. This was an ambush. Razor grinned. "You walked right into the lion's den, sweetheart." Ellie's mind raced. They needed an out. Now the turning point. Just when all seemed lost, a deafening explosion rocked the building. The entire sidewall of the warehouse blew inward, knocking Razor off balance. Through the dust and smoke, a new group of riders stormed in, wearing unfamiliar patches. At the front was Diesel, Razor's former second-in-command. "You crossed the line, Razor," Diesel growled. "Kidnapping a child? Threatening to burn this town to the ground? That ain't what we signed up for." The battle exploded into chaos. Veterans Legion and Diesel's defectors versus the Iron Fangs and mercenaries. Bullets tore through wooden crates. A knife flashed in the dark, slicing through the air. Ellie fought like a woman possessed, dodging, weaving, firing when she had to. Anna screamed as Razor grabbed her, dragging her toward the exit. Ellie was faster. One clean shot straight to Razor's knee. He collapsed, howling in pain. Anna was safe, but Marshall was still standing, and he wasn't finished. The final moment, Marshall aimed his gun directly at Ellie, but before he could fire, a single shot rang out. Marshall staggered. His own men had turned on him. The mercenaries surrendered. The Iron Fangs were finished. Razor, arrested. Brookstone, saved. But this war wasn't just about a town anymore. It was about what came next. A town reborn, and a new legacy begins the aftermath. The air was thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and burning rubber. The Iron Fangs were no more. As the dust settled around the warehouse battlefield, The last remnants of the gang were either unconscious, restrained, or lying on the cold concrete, defeated. Razor groaned in agony, clutching his ruined knee as federal agents moved in. The end of his reign had come. Marshall's mercenaries, those who had survived, stood down, recognizing the unwinnable battle. Their leader lay motionless, his once cunning eyes now devoid of life. A fitting end for a man who fought only for money. Ellie holstered her smoking gun, exhaustion catching up to her. It had been years since she had faced combat, but tonight she fought for something even greater than she had in Vietnam. She fought for home. Anna, freed from her restraints, rushed into Ellie's arms. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. Ellie held her tight. "Always." The turning point. With the Iron Fangs dismantled, Brookstone was free. But winning the battle was only the first step. The next morning the town was buzzing. Store owners cleaned up the wreckage of their businesses. Volunteers helped rebuild Mason's hardware. Even former gang members who had abandoned Razor's cause. Veterans Legion members stood guard, ensuring no remnants of the Iron Fangs would ever rise again. Ellie and Iron Jim, his arm in a sling, stood on the steps of the Brookstone Community Center, where Sheriff Hayes, Chief Roberts, and several town officials gathered for an emergency meeting. "Razor and his men are done," Hayes announced. "The feds are handling the rest. Brookstone is ours again." The room erupted in cheers, but Ellie held up a hand. "This isn't just about taking back our town. It's about keeping it." She turned toward Diesel, Razor's former second-in-command, now a man looking for redemption. The men who followed Razor, they made a choice. But choices can change. We've seen it happen on battlefields. We've seen it happen here. A hush fell over the room. Diesel stepped forward, his jaw tight. "We screwed up," he admitted. "But some of us, we want to make it right." Ellie nodded. "Then prove it." She glanced at Iron Jim, who understood what she was thinking. "If you want to rebuild," Jim said, "help us protect this town. Join us. Work with us. Not as gang members, but as men who finally understand what real strength is." The offer hung in the air like a challenge. Then slowly, one by one, former Iron Fangs stepped forward. And just like that, the Veterans Legion gained new recruits. Not criminals. Men looking for a second chance. A town reborn 1 year later. Brookstone wasn't just healed, it was thriving. The Veterans Legion transformed their old factory headquarters into a fully functional community center, a place where veterans could find work, former gang members could rebuild their lives, young people could be mentored before they fell into the wrong hands. The scars of battle remained, but they were reminders of what the town had overcome. Ellie's legacy. On a warm summer evening, Ellie sat on the front porch of her house, watching the town she had fought for. Iron Jim pulled up on his bike, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Figured you could use one." She took it, giving him a rare smile. "Thought I'd be too old for this kind of thing," she mused. Jim chuckled. "Seems like you've got at least one more fight left in you." She sighed, shaking her head. "Nah, I think this was the last one." But deep down she wasn't sure, because evil never truly disappears. It just waits. And if that day ever came again, she'd be ready. A new chapter begins. The next morning, Ellie drove into town and saw something that made her heart swell. A group of young bikers, some of them former Iron Fangs, riding alongside Veterans Legion members, their patches reading Brookstone Community Watch. Change was happening, real, lasting change. As she watched the motorcycles disappear over the horizon, she whispered to herself, "Not bad for an old lady," and for the first time in a long, long time. Ellie Carter felt at peace. The end. Or perhaps a new beginning. Brookstone was safe, but the world beyond, it still needed people like her. Maybe, just maybe, she had one more mission left. What's next for Ellie Carter? Would you like to see this story continue? Would you watch this as a movie? Drop a comment and let us know.